Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the place where we look at new movies that people can't cut away from. I am your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, I've been saving him a seat at the Walter Reed Theater. It's Arturo Zurita.
Please tell me you saw some at the Alice Tully, though. That's what I've missed the most.
I made sure that I got to see those balcony shots, the spotlight.
As they do. Have you been able to try any of the new ones? Because I know the BAM's the theater they have over there.
This is... I believe the second year in a row that the New York Film Festival is doing a pretty cool thing and doing screenings in all 5 New York boroughs. Granted, I'm still coming across the river from Jersey, so Manhattan's the one that's closest to me, and that's the one that I've stuck to for the most part. But it's cool that they're making it a little bit more accessible, and you don't have to do the trek all the way up to the Lincoln Center to see some New York Film Festival movies. But if you do, there are a lot of really good offerings at this year's festival.
Starting with that poster in the back, baby. Look at that.
Yeah, I picked up it's actually a shirt.
Oh, it's a shirt.
Yeah, the Marty Scorsese shirt.
Is this the one where if you flip it?
No, that's not the one, but there's another shirt that has all the directors' names listed on the back, like it's like a music festival or something like that, which I really dig.
Yeah, those have been the best ones. When South by did that was so cool. And Zach was telling me that there's a New York one where it's not the movies, but it's the directors, and I'm like, that's a memorable shirt. But yeah, that's cool. Were you? That's also the poster design, correct?
Well, no, they have a whole other poster that is designed by Jim Jarmusch, though it's pretty cool, which I'll make sure we put up a picture of at the end of this. But yeah, I mean, they always have some pretty cool designs and stuff. And, you know, we always love to pick up our film festival merch. So I have to show off mine. So hopefully you're checking us out on video and you got to see my cool Scorsese shirt. He'll be watching over me from behind.
He doesn't even have a movie at the festival, which is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people
you saw
thought...
Killers outside of the fest.
I know. A lot of people thought we were going to get Killers at New York, and then ultimately Apple decided to forego all of the fall film festivals.
That is right.
Yeah. But thankfully, still got to see a lot of cool stuff at New York. I know you didn't make it out to the festival this year because you've got a lot of similar offerings at Chicago. So we'll probably...
And I heard it was raining.
It was raining for a lot of the festival, man. Like it's one thing to like just make the trek, the over hour-long trek, like into the city on a day with poor weather, but they also got to stand outside waiting for some of these. I stood outside for stuff. I stood outside for 2 hours before December in some rain, so not the best part of the experience, at least.
Yeah. That's fine. See, but shout out to way too far for me, so I wasn't going to any.
Shout out to brother bro Justin from the Oscar Expert channel, who actually lent me his umbrella before that December screening. Definitely made my morning a lot less miserable than it could have been. But my day got a lot better. That was the day that I saw the opening night film of this year's 61st New York Film Festival, December. There's a lot of really cool movies. I think maybe it makes sense to start off with the opening night film, which previously was screened at Cannes. I know we talked to Amanda a little bit about it back in earlier this year in the spring. Now that I've had a chance to see the upcoming Netflix release, I'm really excited to talk to you about it whenever you get around to it, because I think it's one of the most delicious character studies of the year. And I think character studies sometimes is one of those words that people overuse when they feel like there's not a lot of plot to talk about, but this is like an actually rich, morally gray character study that's very fascinating movie. It's got the story about a notorious tabloid relationship between a married woman and what was at the time a 7th grader. But it revisits them 20 years down the line where they're still in a relationship. They're portrayed by Julianne Moore and Charles Melton, and their lives are a little bit upended when Natalie Portman, who's playing an actress, visits them to do research on an upcoming role based on Julianne Moore's character. It's sort of loosely based on it's sort of loosely based on the story of Mary Kay Letourneau, who had a relationship with one of her 12-year-old students and then ultimately ended up with them, and it sort of explores the weird complications of that, all the ramifications and ripple effects and that it has on their immediate friends and family. It's just a really fascinating look that isn't necessarily like trying to be damning or particularly judgmental, but an honest reflection of the human experience of the people who would go through something like this. And, you know, you see a story that stars great actresses like Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman, and you think that like they are going to like eat the scenery, they're going to be incredible, and they both are. But man, I was surprised that it's Charles Melton, Riverdale's own, who really steals this film. His character is just this really fascinating one in that he's repressed so much and he's kind of pushed so many emotions down that once the character is able to sort of like let some of it out, he's able to portray it in such a convincing way, and he becomes the real draw of this story. I thought he was so good. The whole story is really well done. Todd Haynes, the director, has the ability to do these kind of like slightly melodramatic that verge on campy, but still are really serious dramas. Like there's a lot of very sneaky, funny stuff in this movie. Julianne Moore in particular speaks with this very like light upper palate, like a little bit of a lisp, and it just adds this funny inflection to her lines, which only becomes funnier as Natalie Portman tries to portray it. But I thought this was a fascinating movie. Just a movie that if you see it with a friend, I feel like you'll have, you know, an hour's worth of discussion to get into afterward. There's so much to pull apart here. I easily one of the most fascinating films that I've seen so far this year.
Compared to a couple of the other stuff Todd's done, especially with Julianne Moore, recently with Don't Worry Darling having come out not too long ago, Safe got a first viewing from me, and that kind of plays with what you're saying. It's like a drama, but at the same time it's kind of getting into this like is it really in her head or not? Oh, I see you haven't seen that one.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, how would you compare it to that, or even Days of Heaven?
I mean, it certainly got similar elements to the tone. There's something there's something that's a little bit actorly. I don't know if that's like necessarily the way to describe it. Whereas like I think some of his other work, you feel maybe more of the tone of it. This one is really performance led. I feel like it's the actors who really dictate the like vibes of those scenes, if that makes any sense.
Okay, it's not like a bottle film, is it? Because that's the only image I've seen. I don't know if there's a trailer out or.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a trailer out yet, but it's not a bottle film. It definitely takes place like across several days and in several locations, although it's all centered on this one town. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really well done.
I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. Another one of the spotlight films at the New York Film Festival is one that I know you're excited to see. You're catching it soon. It's the latest from Yorgos Lanthimos, one of my favorite directors, and his newest collaboration with Emma Stone. It's Poor Things, which got really rave reviews out of the Venice Film Festival. A lot of people think this is going to be one of the front runners for the Oscar. If it is a front runner for the Oscar, it is a very weird choice. This is not like your typical prestige Hollywood fare. This is maybe more along the lines of like a Shape of Water or something like that, in that this has got strong comedy elements, strong sci-fi elements. It's very bizarre, and it's also shot in very unique ways. This is another collaboration between Yorgos Lanthimos and the cinematographer Robbie Ryan. So it's a return to some of the fisheye lenses and peephole cameras and
okay.
interesting types of perspectives that they do in films like The Favorite. This film here stars Emma Stone as sort of like a Frankenstein monster type of character, a reanimated figure who is learning how to become a human, and it is a really quirky sort of examination of the things that are like our animalistic instincts and urges and what fulfill us. She learns how to be a human through like her sexual urges and society's response to those urges and stuff like that. You may have heard from its reputation that Emma Stone is like very naked, and for a lot of this movie, it's a very like pointed counter argument to those things that have been going around about the unnecessary nature of a lot of sex scenes in movies. The sex scenes are so essential to how this story is told, and it's able to like really guide this character through her journey of becoming a fuller person. It's so funny and clever in a way that I think is really similar to the tone that Yorgos has been able to strike across other movies like this. Really, the main reason to go out to the theater, though, is that like I think this is Emma Stone giving like one of the all-time great comedic film performances. It leans into her ability to be wacky, but also dramatic. She's so like almost like Jim Carrey-esque in moments here, but sharp in her delivery too. I found her to be really, really incredible as Bella Baxter. It's also got a lot of our favorites in other roles. I thought this is an incredible Mark Ruffalo supporting role, a really great Willem Dafoe performance. Rami doing a lot more like acting than I was expecting. He's really good in this movie too.
Nice.
This is definitely one of the highlights of the whole year. I'm curious what you're going to think of it, because Yorgos has this penchant for doing kind of bizarre movies, but whereas a lot of his other films, I think, are a bit like challenging or disturbing, this one is kind of accessible and sweet. So it might sort of strike a different tone in the end, but definitely looking forward to you catching this one soon.
Very curious. Let's say I gave it 2 thumbs up, because by this time this video should be up exactly when I'm in the theater watching it, and I hope I'm having a good time. Would you put it in your top Yorgos? Because like mine, I think still Dogtooth. I know people would argue for The Lobster. I know some people like The Favorite.
You know, like I am a particularly big fan of Yorgos Lanthimos. So for me, I don't actually like. I like most of his recent work maybe more. I definitely like Dogtooth and The Favorite more. This is maybe like close to The Lobster for me. But it's mostly because I really am such an admirer of his. Like, it's not an insult to the movie, I guess.
All right, I'm excited for it.
I'll also quickly mention that he had another film screening at New York. This is a short film.
That's the one she was there for, not the movie.
Yeah.
She was there for the short.
Exactly. SAG rules. They only talked about the movie while she was there. This is Bleat. It's a short film that previously had only screened at, I believe it was the Athens Film Festival. Yorgos shot this film on celluloid in black and white and without a soundtrack, with the intention that it should only ever be screened on celluloid and only ever with a live accompaniment. So both when it was first screened in Athens and when it was screened again here at the New York Film Festival, it was accompanied by a choir and I think it was a 7-piece orchestra, which was a really cool way to experience the film. You know, it's like transports you to an era when, you know, they had live accompaniment for movies like this too. As for the film itself, it's interesting. It also stars Emma Stone, as we were alluding to, and I think it's a particularly interesting companion to Poor Things because it also deals with ideas of death and rebirth and rebirth through sex, and particularly exploring that with Emma Stone's character. It's vague, and it's certainly like an experiment in how he's setting up these scenes. But it was a really, really cool event to be at. As you mentioned, that both Yorgos and Emma Stone were there for the Q&A. She got a waiver in order to be there to talk about this film, and they made a real point of talking about how they're not going to talk about the other movies they've done. But yeah, I mean, it was a cool event. I don't know if this is ever going to screen again, but
hey, it's like Memory or Memoria. That one wasn't supposed to, and now it is, right? But
we'll
I like
see.
how he's taking it seriously. He won't even say film; it's celluloid.
Exactly, right? Anyway, so those were the Yorgos. That was the Yorgos section of this recap. I want to at least briefly mention Foe. This is the new film from
I have
Garth
heard crazy
Davis, who previously directed Mary Magdalene, and Lion is probably the most notable thing he's done. A lot of attention on this film, particularly because it stars both Saoirse Ronan and Paul Mescal, some of the probably most highly touted young actors of their generation. And I can't really blame them for what's wrong with this movie. I'd say it's the main problem with it is it feels like it was written backwards from its third act twist. There's a thing that happens later in the movie, and everything feels like it's done in service of getting to that moment, to the extent that you can't help but think, well, something else is going on. So inevitably, the film kind of becomes this long waiting game to get to what is a really underwhelming reveal, because you've probably pieced most of the puzzle together by the time we've gotten there. It's, a lot of people have been throwing out that it's like a bad Black Mirror episode. It has a lot in common with one of the great early Black Mirror episodes, which is certainly not doing it any favors. It's also just kind of not fully realized. It's supposed to take place in this future, somewhat dystopian world, but it's so minimal in its setting and in its characters and in its world building that it just ultimately feels hollow. I'm sure there are going to be people who appreciate it for having lots of shots of Saoirse Ronan and Paul Mescal mostly naked together, and if people still reblog that kind of thing on Tumblr, that's the kind of thing that would be popular back in the day, I guess. But other than that, I just can't really see much reason to watch this movie. It's a super, super underwhelming film.
I don't know about the theaters near you, but I saw that the Landmarks were like begging people to come there. Like, you buy yourself a popcorn, we'll throw in 2 free tickets to Foe. They're not even selling tickets to movies. They're selling concessions, and they'll throw a movie in with it. So this, even from the studio's perspective, they know that it did not get the reaction that they wanted. And like you're saying, you can't just rely on 2 actors to bring people in. You may still need a good story.
Work on that script a little bit, yeah. All right, let's talk about one of the big splashy films out of Toronto, Hitman, which sold for $20 million to Netflix.
That's hefty.
As far as we know, that's the biggest acquisition out of this year's Toronto Film Festival. And so there's a lot of hype around this movie. I think a lot of people were also excited for it because people have big hopes for Glenn Powell. They think he can be a future real movie star, and he's not just the star of this thing. He's the co-writer with Richard Linklater. No, I'm not saying that as like a diss on Glenn Powell. It's just like we gotta see movies like this in order to build his profile. How many Top Gun
Mavericks does he need, sir? He's been buddies with him though.
He's done 2 with Devotion. If we were to talk,
that too. Yeah, kind of the similar movie, but with his work with Linklater.
With Linklater,
he was there for the college one. Everybody Wants Some, right? If I'm not mistaken. And then he was also one of the astronaut people who kind of hires the kid in Apollo 10.5.
Yeah. So they have a history of working together, and I think Richard Linklater gets really interesting performances out of Glenn Powell, and Hitman is certainly not an exception to that. I think Glenn Powell is really excellent. This is the kind of movie star role that people have been looking for to sort of help launch a guy like Glenn Powell. He plays a cop working undercover as a hitman in order to sort of entrap different people who are trying to have others killed, and then he ends up sort of falling for one of the desperate women who tries to hire him as a hitman. It's a, very kind of silly comedy, sort of romantic with romantic elements. I don't think it's a all out romantic comedy. It's certainly like a very sexy movie. Him opposite of Adria Arjona, who I don't think I'd seen before this. I guess I skipped Morbius. She's excellent in this film too.
Yeah, she's always had the potential, but like when you're putting her as like the Spanish college student in Life of the Party, what were you really gonna get?
Yeah, I mean, she and Glenn have this really interesting back and forth, this very like sexy dynamic. They are, their charisma and their chemistry is what carries a lot of these scenes, and some of the best scenes are their back and forths. It is a movie that kind of relies on one big lie that is ultimately going to get exposed. That the kind of movie that plays on my anxiety a little bit that I don't love, but it's fun. I think there's maybe like there was a level of expectation that I had, given that it's like in all these film festivals and sold for all this money, that it might like have a deeper resonance or like be more moving than I guess what I got. What it is just like a very slick piece of entertainment. It's not going to be, I think, on a lot of like the year-end lists. I don't think it's like an Oscar contender or anything like that. But it is going to be like a really entertaining watch on Netflix. I feel like it's a pretty fun time, like a good movie to watch with friends too. I think people are going to really enjoy this one. I think it's going to be popular once it drops.
Beautiful. I just love how this man's become kind of like the Grammy's best new artist. And it's always that one pick where it's a new artist who we've known for like a decade. Up and coming Glen Powell.
Exactly. Maybe Drake can write a verse about him too.
Produced by Yachty.
All right, let's talk about Maestro. This is the latest film directed by, starring, co-written by Bradley Cooper. The Star is Born director himself is back with another music-centric film. This one is a biopic of Leonard Bernstein, the classic American composer, conductor, musician, icon, Lydia Tarr mentor, all the above. And it's a really, really interesting film. It's not your classic biopic. It's not the type of film that is interested in doing like a summation of the highlights of Leonard Bernstein's career. It's not going to take you through, here are his 5 classic contributions to the American film music canon. It's more of a portrait of the things that moved him and the people that he loved and the spirit that he had. And it is a movie that captures his just joy for the process of making music and the process and just his joy for life as well. Is primarily really a portrait of his relationship with his wife, played by Carey Mulligan, Felicia, who is really excellent opposite Bradley Cooper. They have this kind of like classic movie star energy where it's like a little bit His Girl Friday-ish, where they're rapid fire delivering lines and cutting each other off and speaking over each other and in the little gaps here and there. And it's like surprisingly funny in bits too, just their charisma sparking off of one another. I think it's also just very beautifully directed. There are some incredible compositions in this film. He has this recurring camera that sort of runs along top of the characters. That's a really interesting angle. And I don't know. It's a strange biopic for sure, and it's also just an interesting choice for Bradley Cooper in terms of his portrayal of like the toil that an artist goes through in his personal life and sacrifice of his professional ambition. But I just found it ultimately to be pretty beautifully done. Really, really won me over.
You get distracted?
The nose was something I was definitely looking for going into it, and I'm pleased to report there were only 2 shots in the whole
Okay.
movie where I found it distracting, and one of them is the one that everybody's complaining about in the trailer.
All right.
So, and they're both in the black and white section. For whatever reason, it stands out much less in color than it does in black and white.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for it. I feel like we're in this era where it's like we're really early on. By the time you and I are getting ready to retire, this man will probably have a slew of movies where he's director and star. And it's crazy to think that we're barely on, what, a second one?
Yeah. I mean, the other crazy thing about it is just the list of heavy hitters he has attached as producers. Steven Spielberg gets a produced by title card. Martin Scorsese gets a produced by title card. There's a lot of people who are, giving him the seal of approval. Did you know that Steven Spielberg was going to direct this project, and then when he couldn't, he saw 15 minutes of Star is Born before deciding Bradley Cooper was right for it?
Really?
Yeah.
So it's for hire work.
Exactly. All right. Let's move on to another one of the centerpiece films at the New York Film Festival. Priscilla, the latest film from Sophia Copolla, about Priscilla Presley, who meets Elvis Presley when she's 14 years old and eventually moves in with and marries him. A fascinating look that is a bit of a different portrayal of the American music icon than the one we got from director Baz Luhrmann with star Austin Butler. Kaylee Spaney plays Priscilla Presley. Jacob Elordi plays Elvis Presley in this film and does so very convincingly. Like, there's a lot of people sort of saying he's given Austin Butler a run for his money. It's certainly a very different performance than the one that Austin Butler's putting forward, but I found it to be like pretty transportive. I thought he did a very convincing job. It's not so much an imitation as it is like an embodiment of the celebrity with like a decently convincing voice. Kaylee Spaney, though, does a really, really excellent job as well in the role of Priscilla, really guiding this character from a girl into a woman. We follow her story through several years. And I think it's got a lot of the classic Sophia Coppola, running staples, themes, or whether it's the sort of like pain behind the beauty and glamour and the inner turmoil of like outwardly wealthy and happy people.
To be the daughter of a Coppola. I mean, it's like the one person who, if they have that talent coming from up above,
right, she's got a lot of insight in that department.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, look, and that's the thing. It's the thing that she does really well, and I think she's able to apply it in a really interesting way with Priscilla, and portraying her as this woman who ends up kind of entrapped by all these wonderful things that are around her. She enters this world as a girl who doesn't know much and is manipulated and sort of like led to believe certain things are okay when they're a lot more complex than that. And, I think there's a version of this film that's maybe a lot more damning and a lot more treats like Elvis particularly as more of a villain, but it's a more nuanced portrayal of that. It's a portrayal of them as they felt, and they had a loving relationship, and I don't know. It's a really interesting movie in how it chooses to how it doesn't play a heavy hand in depicting her marriage to Elvis Presley.
So it's safe to say that it makes sense why the estate said no.
Yeah, for sure. That's the other interesting thing about it, is that there are no songs written by Elvis in this movie. There is a little bit of music, but it's the estate did not approve, for sure.
Nice. I'm curious for it. I saw they moved it to November, and I think Kayleen has been really good, and with Saltburn coming out for our boy over here, he's going to have a jam-packed fall/December.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'll be interesting for sure to see how this one lands. I'm sure it's going to be smack dab in the middle of a lot of discourse as well. but I think it's a very clear-eyed portrayal for sure. Want to at least talk briefly about All of Us Strangers, because I know you'll get the chance to catch it soon.
Why'd you hate it?
It's the new film directed by Andrew Hay, about a screenwriter who meets his neighbor and it changes his day-to-day life. I don't know. It's hard to talk about this film without getting into big spoilers. I think some of them are in the trailer, but I don't know if everybody's had a chance to catch the trailer. Needless to say, this is a film that sort of mines the character's past for like coming to terms with the person he is through exploring his past. And it does it in an intriguing, somewhat surreal way. There's like a kind of phantom element that plays throughout this film. And I thought it was an incredibly tender script. I thought it was really lovely in its portrayal of like trying to overcome your own traumas and how your past can kind of inhibit you from becoming the person you want to be. I thought all that stuff was really moving. There are certain like emotional climaxes where I felt everybody in the theater around me like weeping, just openly crying at this film. And maybe I'm just made of stone or something, but it just didn't get me there. I thought it was well done and smart and like, again, just like pretty lovely and well acted too. You know, it stars a lot of people we love, including Andrew Scott, who is the hot priest on Fleabag, Paul Mescal, Jamie Bell, Claire Foy. It didn't really move me the way that it seems to be moving a lot of people. I feel like I'm going to be in the minority on that one, so I'm curious to see what you think about the film when you get a chance to see it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, let's move into a couple films that I think are maybe a little more under the radar, but I think are pretty interesting in their own ways, whether they're bad or good. One of my sneaky hits at a festival is The Sweet
And Elordi's in this.
Yeah, he has a really fun part in it. I've seen a lot of Jacob Elordi this year. Also seeing a lot of Io Debris this year, who shows up in a really funny part in this film. I don't know if this is going to make sense to most people, but to me, I feel like this is like a Lana Del Rey song come to life. She's sort of Talia Ryder plays this girl who is a kind of a runaway and just exploring different aspects of like the American underbelly in a way that's like glamorously unglamorous, if that makes any sense. She just floats through all these different social scenes and through all these very interesting collections of characters, gathering a picture of modern American life. It's got like somebody could compare it. Somebody smarter than me can like compare it to a Mark Twain novel or something like that. I thought it was really funny. It has a great collection of actors. We mentioned already Jacob Elordi and Io Debris. Simon Rex is in this as well. Jeremy O'Harris, who I don't think I've seen him act much, but I definitely am a fan of his writing, and he's very funny in this film as well. I don't know. I was incredibly charmed by this. This is certainly my favorite performance from Talia Ryder, who gets this opportunity to be like funny and alluring and surprising. Really, really good here. It's also shot very interestingly. I think it's shot on a 16 millimeter, or maybe it's 35, by Sean Price Williams, who's a cinematographer that's worked with some filmmakers we like. There's just a very interesting vibe to this movie. Like, the opening credits come up and it says Talia Ryder meets, and then it lists all the other actors in the movie. And there's just some interesting choices that they make here that I really stuck with me. I really rocked with the vibe that they had in Sweet East.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you're going to get a chance to check that one out, because I don't even know if that has a release date yet. Yeah.
Let's see. The new Letterboxd got a little tab right there. Maybe a festival.
Yeah, maybe it has. Oh, December 1st, maybe? That'd be cool.
Hey.
So
Okay.
that's super far in the future.
Not too far.
Um, Another film that I'm sure people will be talking about is the latest from Harmony Korine, the infrared nightmare known as Aggro Drift. It is certainly an experience. It is definitely unique. It's a movie about hitmen in Miami trying to take down this criminal underbelly, and it's all done in this very nightmarish, dreamlike way. It honestly, like, the visual design of it it's not as it's closer to the world of like hip hop videos and ASMR audio and video game cutscenes than it is like a
Okay.
traditional film. Like, characters sometimes will do these repeated motions that make them look like NPCs. There's all these repeated lines that are like chanting. There's so much infrared twerking, like way more twerking than I've ever seen in a feature film before. He's certainly like trying to give it this very like edgelordy vibe, which makes sense given the name of his company. I found it to just be kind of like a crazy cacophony of sound and color that like overwhelmed me till I felt numb. Like, it's a movie where it's like you feel your pupils widen to try and like take it all in, and then at some point you kind of glaze over because it doesn't really amount to much. I see there's some people who found like deeper meaning in its exploration of like the American dream and stuff like that, but I it's nothing that I picked up from it on my watch. I was tired of it maybe 10 minutes in.
Sheesh. So you're on the side that he's trolling more than anything else.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a big troll on just the idea of movies even.
Damn. Okay.
I mean, certainly like interesting, and for you and me, I definitely think it's worth seeing because I definitely want to hear your take on it. But
Yeah, it's completionist, but
certainly
not necessarily. Yeah.
not a full recommendation.
Okay. So
Something
I'll
that
stick with his scratch and sniff stickers from
Beach Bum.
from Beach Bum as his
Yeah.
highlight.
I do want to give a shout out though to Janet Planet. This is an upcoming film that A24 will be releasing. It is
cool.
the feature film debut of playwright Annie Baker, whose plays I've been reading recently in preparation for this film, and I've discovered that I love her as a writer. And she carries over her style from the stage in some ways into this film because she is a writer who is unafraid of having her characters just be silent and not necessarily be super talkative, super responsive to one another. There are lots of pauses in her plays, and there's also lots of like gaps here to sort of fill in for yourself in a way. It's the story of this 11-year-old girl Lacey who's spending the summer at home with her mom. It's the early 90s. Her mom, Janet, is played by Julianne Nicholson, who is one of the more like underrated actresses out there, I feel like. To me, it's like a really beautiful and detailed portrayal of being an awkward preteen, an awkward introverted child. If you've ever like faked sick and stayed home to watch like cartoons, there's something in this to relate to for you, because they've got this very interesting dynamic in that they have like their lives revolve around each other, but they are meant to be separate people. And Julianne Nicholson's character Janet is a single mother, so she's going through different relationships and friendships, and the film is kind of divided amongst those different relationships. It's a very interesting, quiet look at these characters, and I found it to be like extremely relatable on just like an only child level, but I also just thought it was extremely charming in the precision of its of the type of person it's trying to depict, right? Like it's one of those things where everything feels lifted from real life and not the kind of thing that you might notice. They're really well observed details about character.
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely a sweet, smaller film. Not sure when that one's coming out. I want to go quickly through a couple other movies that played the festival. Start with Orlando, My Political Biography. It's a pretty interesting story about it's sort of half portraying these different trans actors depicting the character Orlando from the Virginia Woolf novel. And then half of them are sort of just documentary interviews with the actors about their own lives. So it simultaneously becomes the story of Virginia Woolf's Orlando and the story of all these modern trans people who have found echoes of themselves in the character of Orlando, who kind of was sort of like an early literary trans icon in a way, if you want to call it that. We saw a film at Sundance a couple years ago called Framing Agnes. I don't know if you remember that one,
Yep.
which did a similar idea of reenacting interviews of historical trans figures while also depicting modern trans actors and interweaving their documentary on interviews. I felt like the balance was a little bit better in Orlando, My Political Biography. I thought it was a really interesting marrying of the past and the present. So I would definitely recommend you check out that one if that one sounds interesting.
Cool.
This is one that I think we've both seen. Evil Does Not Exist. It's the latest from Ryosuke Hamaguchi, of a film about a man who lives in a village that is subject to getting a new glamping project, and also the unexpected ramifications of that. There's some really interesting things in here about man's relationship with nature and upsetting the natural order of things. I think it is a very patient film that then almost feels like it rushes its ending, but there's some really, really cool thematic resonance to how it ends. Like there's really fascinating ideas here, even if I didn't find the execution as impactful as I did in something like Drive My Car.
Yeah, because Drive My Car was 3 hours long. Yet this one, the intro alone feels like it's 3 hours long, but it's for a reason. It's very patient, but you're getting to know again this land, because what ends up being the crux of the story is that this company really wants to not just build this place, but build it so fast that they're going to affect the water. And you realize quickly, oh yeah, that's what we saw the guy kind of doing a majority of the beginning of the movie, and how everyone in the town uses the water, but that because the water hasn't been contaminated, that's what sets it apart. And there's this idea of balance, that they understand why they want to build it, because they too kind of disrupted, this place by living there. But it's how you take care of it. And the way that the intro comes back into play, because of this place, and how the title comes into play, it'll stick with you. And that's why I really want to recommend it. You just have to have a lot of patience in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I still think that as much as it stands out, especially with that ending, it is a little rushed, and it left both of us kind of asking like, I still have some questions of how this would play out after the final scene. So I'll leave it at that.
For sure.
It definitely doesn't reach up to his last two, which would have been Driving My Car, and even I know someone was asking us when we covered it at TIFF, Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, but I would still recommend it as one to catch before the year wraps.
For sure. The Argentinian film La Practica, or The Practice, about a yogi, a yoga instructor who finds his life is sort of falling apart in various ways. It's an extremely dry, wry comedy, very, very deadpan in its delivery, and its sort of satire of modern wellness culture and optimization. There are certainly very funny things that happen. I ultimately just didn't have the patience for this one. I don't know if it's because I saw it in the middle of the day and was like ready for a little bit of a nap, or if it's just like a little too slow. I don't know, languid for me. But yeah, it just, as much as I laughed at elements of it, I also didn't have the patience required for it.
Okay.
Yeah. La Chimera, the latest film from Alice Rohrwacher, I believe is how her name is pronounced. Maybe I'm wrong there. An interesting film set in Italy with Josh O'Connor, Isabella Rossellini. Josh O'Connor, I did not know was as fluent in Italian as he appears to be here. Maybe he learned it for the part or whatever, but he does a
Nice.
very good, convincing job of acting partially in Italian. He plays an Englishman, though, who is in Italy and fresh out of jail, and he is a grave robber of ancient grave sites. Him and his cohort, which is a really just like fascinating like subsection of criminality, that just being immersed in that world as they dive into tombs and try to find these hidden gems lost to time is a pretty fascinating world to explore. It also, seeks to sort of explore like what is like what is like a legacy, and what are the purposes of these sort of like artifacts, and should they be disturbed. And there's lots of really interesting elements woven in there. It's directed with this really playful energy too, in that it's not there's like these sequences that are sort of like fanciful and imaginative. There's some fourth wall breaking and stuff like that going on. I thought it was a pretty interesting movie. I don't know if I fully absorbed all that it was trying to depict, but I was at least like captivated by a lot of it.
Okay. I was hearing some mixed stuff out of TIFF, but I've seen a lot of other people, including yourself, talk about it, so I'm excited to catch it in Chicago.
Nice. And then we've both had a chance to see Pictures of Ghosts, which is a new Brazilian documentary that depicts this filmmaker, his evolution, both personally and the evolution that he's seen around him in downtown Recife as classic movie palaces that once stood around the city disappear, and the world sort of moves on. I think as big cinephiles who also have experienced our fair share of dwindling theatrical options and heartbreaking theater closures, there's a lot to really relate to or empathize with in this movie. But it's also a really fascinating look at just how both a culture and a city evolves over time. There's some really like cute sort of home video elements to this movie. Sequences dedicated to neighbors' dogs and stuff like that that are charming. It's not necessarily the like most like deeply I don't know, riveting subject, particularly given if you don't have a relationship to like Recife, but there's a lot of really interesting elements in there. What did you think about Pictures of Ghosts?
I know him most recently from Bacurau. I haven't seen Aquarius yet. That's been one that's been on my watch list. But if you pull up his movies, like a big part of this film is that if you watch it and you like it, you're going to want to see a lot of his films. Yeah. If you watch it, you're going to want to see a lot of his films because that's what's going to help a lot about it. It's segmented into what is his own home place at first. It's like it starts off really personal before you get into what is pitched as him going around his town to see how those movie houses have decayed. But like he begins with just how he used his own home as a set, but then how his own home changed reflected how everything outside was changing, and how the city kind of got split into what part of it got funding and then what part over the water pretty much just laid to decay. And when he gets into how he was filming inside of his house, it would have been more impacting if I had seen those movies and I was like, damn, I wish I would have caught those. So I think that would really help with it. But I thought it was still fascinating to see his dissection of the movies. Obviously, of the movie palaces, he has more of a connection to these places, but just that idea that the town starts dying when the theaters start dying. The faster you get rid of art, the faster the place starts to go downhill. Yeah. And there's a short I'm trying to remember. I was trying to search it up right now, and it's of a theater overseas that was closing down. It's like a 40-minute short, and it's this documentarian who covers it, and it's just the theater nail, chair, the screen, piece by piece getting taken apart as they interview people who've worked there for years. And it kind of reminded me a lot of this movie. If I could remember the short's name, that'd be a great companion piece to this. But It is. It's like a bittersweet way of, even if those aren't our theaters, you can't help but to imagine the ones that you grew up with, right? Our blockbusters, our own local cinemas, and what it would be like if those got taken away.
Definitely. All right, got a couple last films that I want to talk about here. Let's start it with The Settlers, which I believe is going to be Chile's submission to
Yes,
the
sir.
foreign or the international film Oscar race, which very exciting because I think it's a very interesting film. You know,
I'm
we've
glad you
seen,
liked
I
it.
think, in the last couple of years, I feel like we've seen a bunch of movies that try to sort of take on this idea of the colonization efforts, the early settlers that wiped out so many indigenous people, and there's been different takes on it. I think one of the more memorable ones is The Nightingale, which we saw at Sundance a few years back, from
Australia.
Jennifer Kent. You know, you compared this one to one we saw at Sundance earlier this year,
Yeah.
Sorcery, which was another Chilean set one. But I agree with you. I think you were saying this when you saw it at Toronto, that this is probably one of the most effective ones we've seen, if not the most effective. A really harrowing look at the brutality that accompanied early colonization efforts here in the early 20th century, as a Chilean landowner hires a set of it hires an English general, an American soldier, and a native man to clear a path essentially for his sheep to be able to breed and travel to the ocean. It is a stark look that is like unflinching at how the evils that were like wrought upon the indigenous people, and it also has this like uh, pretty intriguing kind of like third act to it, which sort of depicts another kind of indignity that indigenous people went through. I think it's just a very smartly done and like uncompromising look at what's a really like upsetting, awful period in history.
Yeah, it is. I'm glad you caught it in a theater because this is one of those where it's like it's all about the vastness of the landscapes,
Mm-hmm.
and them trying to pretty much uh, get the border, the outline of what would be Chile, and how they almost like funneled it through this sheep hoarding business,
Yeah.
right? You know, we're just extending where how far the sheep should go, and I think it's a really good movie because a lot of it is left for your own interpretation.
Yeah.
There are moments though where it's like some of the performances could have been a little bit better, some of
Mm-hmm.
the direction, especially when it comes to some of the turmoil that they go through. Because from these three, you have what is an Englishman as he's presented, the American cowboy, and then the indigenous dude who they consider to be the dude who's going to turn on them at some point. But you're really seeing
Mm-hmm.
it from his perspective, right? And there are moments in the movie where they don't answer anything for you. You are led to kind of fill in the blanks of what that
Yeah.
means and how this movie is pretty much the setup for the entire civilization that is Chile. And I find that fascinating because it doesn't hold your hand for that. It's you're kind of left to connect it yourself of like, this is like the beginning landing of what would end up becoming this entire country. I think the performances specifically from the actress who you see in the second half to the third half, I
Yeah.
thought was really good. And again, just the way that it's shot, because there are two movies that are very similar this year in terms of submissions. The other one is Godland, which I've been telling you to
Mm.
watch. I
Yeah.
believe it's on Criterion. You didn't get to catch it in a theater. It's twice as good as this.
Ooh. Okay.
So while this is the new one from this year, Godland came out or was doing the festival run last year. Godland is even better than this movie. So if I
All
were to
right.
still pick out of the top five, Godland would be the pick. But if someone were to get it in terms of something filling in that spot for this type of story, the Settlers is really good too. But this one, bro, it's got that same style of the capturing the vastness of these landscapes, with
Right.
it also being through a religious side. How he's colonizing and kind of spreading his word, which is more than just a good deed. That ends up also having its obvious negative connotations. But hey, they'd make for a really good double feature.
Very cool. All right. Let's talk briefly about Anatomy of a Fall, because I've already recommended it on our weekend must watch, because it is starting to make its way into theaters, at least in America. It is a highly touted film, a really gripping did she or didn't she do it thriller, courtroom drama, that's slyly funny, has one of the
50 Cent
best
music video.
one of the best music drops of the year, and also an incredible performance from Sandra Hüller. I think it's just really intriguing, great discussion movie as well. I feel like we're going to have a really good discussion about it, so I don't want to get too deep into it before you get the chance to see it. It's a great movie, and I understand why a lot of people wanted it to be France's submission to the Oscars this year. But I'm happy they went with the taste of things.
I'm gonna let y'all finish.
This is just an absolutely delightful film that is about esteemed gastronomer and his incredible cook and their relationship, making gourmet food together for several years. There's so many like incredible, intricate dishes and fancy ingredients that are meticulously prepared. Like there's so much food porn in it, but at its heart, I think this is a really like simple, hearty movie. Its original French title was pot au feu, which is basically like a French beef soup, which makes a lot of sense. Like this is a beef stew of a movie. It is not complicated, but it fills you up. It warms your heart and satiates your soul. It is a really tender process film that it's about the amount of love that it takes to put into a great meal and the care that it takes to also love somebody simultaneously. It just is a really uplifting, sweet movie where people are like so good to each other. And I just, wanted to live in this world as long as I could. I maybe wanted to pause it and like go cook something. Maybe it's because I've been getting more into cooking that I just love this so much. But I found it to be like every food word you want to use, whether it's like scrumptious, delectable, tasty, whatever. It is all of those things. This was a great meal of a movie.
Nice. I'm very excited for this one. There is a lot of screenings in Chicago, and hopefully I get to catch one with the director because I'm very curious to see this one because I think this is gonna be one of the finalists. I like France is just a shoe in. It doesn't matter what they submit. Right. The battle is really what's gonna be their pick, right?
Exactly.
Not that if it's gonna get added.
They're always at least on the short list, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah, definitely a contender. All right, so we'll wrap things up with the film that probably has left the biggest imprint on me thus far. Definitely a downer. I don't know how to transition out of this one, so we might as well put it at the end. It is The Zone of Interest, the latest film from Jonathan Glazer, who's, of course, the incredible director behind films like Sexy Beast and Under the Skin. This movie is a very interesting adaptation of the writer Martin Amos's novel of the same name, The Zone of Interest. It is a profile of the commandant at Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, basically the German general in charge of running the Nazi concentration camp where they executed, countless Jews. But rather than focusing on the brutality and on the carnage that was done behind the walls of Auschwitz, it instead focuses its camera outside to his family life, to his home life, what his wife was like, what his children are like, and their personal issues and problems. It is a really interesting depiction of the banality of evil, the bureaucratic and businesslike way in which awful things are enacted, and the sort of like unfeeling nature that evil has. I think we're at a point where we've had so many films that have depicted the Holocaust. We're not at a loss for seeing stories like that. But what I think is really interesting about how Jonathan Glazer chooses to approach things here in The Zone of Interest is that it's less about like the Nazism of it all and is more about the humanness of it all and the way that ordinary people can enact extremely terrible, awful crimes and genocidal type of damage, and it's something that makes the film, even though it is a period piece, something that's incredibly resonant today, something that is timeless, even though it is pinned to a specific time. So I thought this was a really stunning achievement. It is very masterfully shot, edited. It's also particularly beautifully sound designed. Maybe not beautiful is the right word. Maybe horrifically sound design is the right word to use. In a Q&A he had at the New York Film Festival, apparently the script that was for the sound designer specifically was just as long as the script that they used to shoot the film. And it combined that with Mika Levy's score, which is harrowing.
Yeah,
it
did it again, I hear.
It is incredible. I mean, similar to Under the Skin, just the kind of score that gets like under your skin. Sorry for the pun, I guess. And you feel like you can't shake it. It is more than haunting. It is haunted. It is dispiriting. I don't know. It is so discomforting. I don't know. It's a very artful approach to this kind of subject, and I think there's some people who will maybe not respond to how indirect it is, or maybe even that it is kind of simple, but I think it is still really powerful in what it's saying and how it's trying to say it.
Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, you've seen The White Ribbon?
No, actually, not that one.
Okay.
The closest comparison I would put out there, I think you've seen Son of Saul. This is almost like the inverse of Son of Saul, because Son of Saul is another film where a lot of it is obscured because you're focused so closely on Saul in Auschwitz. This is the same thing, but take that outside of the walls, right?
Okay. Oh, I'm very much looking forward to that one. We've heard nothing but great things since Cannes and how impactful it is. And I mean, just adding all those elements of it is definitely one to catch in theaters, because I think A24 picked this one up for the winter, right? December?
Yeah, I believe it's out in December. And it also, intriguingly, because this is a film that is primarily in German, even though this is a UK production.
That's true.
They are submitting it as a contender for Best International Film, so it might get a nomination there too.
Of course it is. Yeah, it's a shoe-in right there. It's almost like not even fair at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really stacked year for those for the international film category for sure.
And Best Picture?
And Best Picture, yeah, we have a lot of exciting movies that I'm sure we're going to continue talking about throughout the year. Going to revisit a lot of these movies when you get the chance to catch them in Chicago over the next week or two well. But that's most of what I saw at New York Film Festival. I still got
pretty good
screenings of The Curse, that Nathan Fielder, Emma Stone project. I've got a screening of the series. I got a screening of The Killer, the new David Fincher movie that I know you're also catching. And I've got Ferrari, the Michael Mann film with Adam Driver, later this week.
Reviews are just dropping?
Yeah.
It's Michael Mann?
I mean, I'm excited for that one too. That teaser trailer really got me hyped. So we'll catch up with all those for this fest.
Yeah, just a little recap right now out of the stuff.
If I have to throw together a real quick
just
top 5, I definitely put Zone of Interest in there. I'd definitely put Sweet East in there. That's definitely my most delightful surprise of the festival. Poor Things, hilarious. I can't wait to revisit that. Maestro, surprisingly, I just thought it was really beautifully done, and the performances in it particularly were great. And then I guess I kind of want to say May December, but I'm going to go with The Taste of Things because, man, I want to eat all that food so bad.
Nice. Solid lineup.
Yeah, very solid New York Film Festival. I've enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, I'm curious to see if there's any films from this lineup that people are particularly excited for. Let us know in the comments down below. Or if you had a chance to catch any of these movies at the various festivals they've played at. I'm definitely curious to see what people think about all these exciting upcoming releases. We'll definitely get into a lot more film festival coverage very soon on Intercut, as well as more of our usual weekend must watch. We're in the middle of Scorsese-tember, or Tober. I can't keep the months straight anymore anyway, but yeah, we're gonna keep it rocking here on Intercut. Anything we should hit before we wrap this one up?
No, that's pretty much. Let us know your thoughts on any of these movies. Always remember that just because you can't make it to New York or Chicago or across the border to TIFF overseas, like you will have a local festival. We've been shouting out the Philly Fest. We've been shouting out New Orleans, Atlanta, Sliff, of course. So keep an eye out for all of those because you don't have to wait for the theatrical release on a lot of these movies. Chances are you may be able to catch that at a local festival.
Absolutely. Also, make sure you're catching up with all our Intercut coverage on every social channel that you can. We're at Intercut Pod across different social medias. You can catch some of our reels or TikToks or even some tweets and graphics that also supplement our coverage here by following us. Also, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/intercutpod for as little as $1 a month. You can support the show. I think you can also now just become a member and get updates on Patreon. So that's a pretty good way to just keep up with what's new on the show. You might be able to do that for free. You won't get the cool benefits that the patrons do, but you'll get some early updates on what we've got going on.
Interesting.
Yeah. What else is there? Follow us on iTunes or whatever podcatcher you use. Leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that. And that's about all until next edition of Intercut. Until that time, I'll see you on 65th Street.